Now, before we do that fact-checking of government propaganda, to news today that wiped the smirk off the Treasurer's face. The Reserve Bank today had bad news for Australia and more proof that the Albanese government is bungling the economy. There was no surprise in the bank's big call, no change today in interest rates. The cash rate stays at 3.6%. But the bad news was in the Reserve Bank's updated forecast for the economy, almost all for the worse for the next quarter. Unemployment is expected to be higher than thought. Inflation as well, the CPI. In fact, the trimmed mean inflation which the bank looks at most in deciding interest rate cuts is now tipped to go up more than half a percentage point, higher than was thought, to 3.2%, simply too high, and higher than the growth in GDP, which is expected to go up a little more than expected, to 1.8%, which is still weak. In fact, the Reserve Bank suggested there would now be only one more rate cut next year. That's it. So the Treasurer, minutes later in Parliament, looked grim.
The usual politics will be played by those opposite. We've made a lot of progress together in our economy. We know there's more work to do, and we've acknowledged that throughout.
The opposition leader went for the Prime Minister's throat. The Prime Minister could only say in reply that he was, giving us handouts, which are paid by you to ease the cost of living that is felt by you.
Australians have just been denied a Christmas rate cut because of Labor's reckless spending. 32% of households are going without food or skipping meals, and in some suburbs, 90% are struggling to pay their mortgage. Labor has just killed a Christmas rate cut. Is this what the Prime Minister meant when he promised that life would be cheaper under him?
We have implemented a consistent policy of support of cost of living measures.
Joining me is Sky News Business Editor Ross Greenwood. Ross Greenwood, thank you so much for your time. Inflation is back, at least, for a year or more. Unemployment is up and growth is still weak. I tell you what, this is not a great set of numbers.
Look, it's pretty tough for the Reserve Bank right now to try and work this out. And so as a result, it's going to do nothing. It will do nothing for a long period of time. Even the money markets say that if there is an interest rate cut coming, and the Reserve Bank's got one sort of in their modelling, that's not going to happen until the middle of next year. But even then, you're going to see a lot of data between now and then that could suggest the economy's not growing, the unemployment rate's rising, and then you've got inflation, which is also rising now and probably likely to continue to rise with energy prices increasing. So the issue is what to do. And the point is the Reserve Bank's best guess is do nothing. Sit on your hands, keep interest rates on hold and just watch and see what happens next. But the real issue, as you point out, is that if unemployment keeps on rising from its current levels of around 4.5%, then, at some point the other mandate for the Reserve Bank is not just controlling inflation, but also keeping the unemployment rate down. They might have to actually start cutting interest rates to address a rising unemployment rate in Australia.
Honestly, we're not there yet. I don't want to be alarmist, but it is perilously indicative of a country that might be going to stagflation at some stage, which is the worst of all possible worlds. Yep. Now, on the blame front, the Treasurer today said, oh no, none of this was his fault. It wasn't because of high government spending, although I wonder who on earth is creating all this extra spending then. What do you make of it?
Well, there is no doubt that the one thing that the government can have the finger pointed at it for is the lack of productivity. It's on its watch. It's really got worse under the Labor government. And so as a result, the economy can't grow faster. Now, with all of the spending that the government has done, it could be excused if the economy were growing. Now, the long-term average growth rate for Australia's economy is 3%, give or take. Now, at the moment, it's growing at 1.8%. If it was growing closer to its long-term average of 3%, much of the spending the government has done would be basically overtaken by tax takes. Now, the second part about this is the reason why it's actually in a pretty decent budget position is because there's lots of people in jobs. But as we've just indicated, the unemployment unemployment rate is starting to rise. So that is changing. And also, most of the jobs created over the past 4 years have been on government-related programs. And really, at some point, that is going to have to stop, because really that's part of the reason why the private sector is not able to afford to get workers, is not able to afford to invest to build new homes, is not able to invest to actually create the economic growth that Australia needs to basically afford the government spending.
Well, I'm going to tip, Ross, that you're optimistic in saying that's got to stop. It won't stop. Those are primarily, those public servants, Labor voters. There's no way Labor's going to do that. And don't forget also the other driver of what little growth there's been, but growth in the tax take as well, particularly mass migration. So that's not going to be wound back much either. How do we get out of all this?
Well, it is the government effectively either getting lucky, so that comes from China and a resources boom, and Jim Chalmers has been lucky in the past where that has really saved him in many ways, or alternatively you get a situation where AI, or we get some sort of massive breakthrough technologically, but you can't bank on that, of course. That's the issue. So to your point about the government continuing to spend, we heard it today, even Chris Bowen, the energy minister, saying there's going to be 3 hours free electricity for people in the middle of the day. Well, who's paying for that, for goodness sakes? Well, he says, oh, that'll come because it just is another example of the government trying to assuage people's higher costs by effectively taking other taxpayers' money and providing them with some support and relief. So this is a big issue, and it doesn't necessarily help the overall structural problems that Australia has got right now.
Absolutely correct. Ross Greenwood, thank you so much for that analysis. Really appreciate it.